All right, so let's finish up. I think still got a little bit to do, but I know being aware of time, I think tomorrow I'm going to have to just do the lecture part and go through the labs because we still have you know, lab 4, 5, and 6 to go through. So we need to catch up on that. But let's finish this, get you with your quiz, and then go on. You guys can continue on. So we'll circle back to that last question after this, but let's at least finish this. So we have objects now, which are great, but also we have access to those built-in methods. So we have a bunch of methods. I'm only going to go through a few of them, just as with document, string, all these arrays. There's a whole bunch of ones that you can explore, but these are some good ones. So we may have other ways to hold on here for a second. Let me look at this. I think I skipped something here. I'm sorry. Additional ways to create objects. I'm sorry, we forgot this part. So we can do the functional pattern with the object literal. We can do the constructional pattern with the new up, or we can actually just use this object constructor, which is just, again, a different way of creating objects, but you pick and choose, right? You can use the object constructor, which, again, like new string, we can just say new object, instantiate it. So even generic objects have a constructor which generates an empty object. So new object, you know, a way of defining it, and then you can add to it in the same way if you wanted to do it in this way. Stores an empty object in the personal for person1 variable. You can add properties and methods to it using that dot notation or bracket notation, how we could normally do that. You can also use an object.create method. So some people prefer to create object instances without first creating constructors. They want to do it in this way, right? So they are creating only a few instances. They can do it. So JavaScript has a built-in method called create that allows you to do that. So if you have an object already, you want to create another one off of that, you can use this create method. It takes an existing object, allows you to create another one. With it, you can create a new object using the existing object as a prototype, and you can create a new one. So there's a couple ways of doing these, right? You may need to look at them yourself and see what you know, you may prefer, right? So, you know, if we wanted to create an empty object, which is just an object literal, and we console log that empty object, we're going to get an empty object back. However, if we, you know, use an empty object equals to new object equals to new, and we console log that, right? Empty object. Let's see what that one looks like. So they're still empty. There are still objects, right? They're empty. Both do the same. But some people prefer this way. Again, you got to keep in mind that when we're looking at this stuff, there has been many versions of JavaScript. So there's many ways. Like I remember working explicitly like this for many years, and then the new syntax comes along with this kind of stuff, right? And at the same time comes along with the create features and things like that. So there are newer features. The other ones are not deprecated. They're still there, but the more modern JavaScript, I mean, again, you got newer browsers, you know, support that. The older don't. So sometimes you get in a situation where you need to just revert back to like this original kind of form. Nothing wrong with either of these. As JavaScript improves, what they're really trying to do is they're really trying to mimic like C# and Java. That's what they're trying to get to, so that you can take what you learned there and apply it. And as the versions of the ECMAScript come out, they keep adding and adding these things, right, to allow people to write until such time they may depreciate the other things, right? So on those objects, we have built-in methods. So one is called object assign. So what this does is this copies. So this will copy all properties and your properties from one or more source objects to a target one. So we can take in this example, the target object is A and B, and we need to assign it to a new object, which is B and C, right? So you can see there that when you actually do that, it'll keep A, it'll overwrite B. So let's see here. Yes, it'll overwrite B, and it'll take C. So console log the target object is, that's actually, this should be, I'm sorry, that is a typo. It should be 1 and 2B. It should be, the target should be this one here. The return target is A1, B4, and C5. So basically, it merges the two together and creates a new object of it. So it basically assigns, copies everything from one and applies it to the other. Where you would see this a lot, I've seen this a lot, is in Redux, which is a state management for React, where sometimes you need to take the previous properties of the state and copy them forward into the next store, which the store is actually an object in itself. It's just a copy of itself. So anyhow, there is a typo there. The expected output of target is 1 and 2, and then when you merge it or you assign it, you're basically copying all those properties into the new one, and you have a bigger kind of object that has everything with the reconciliation values happening. So you may not use it. You may use it. I just wanted to note it because I've used it quite a bit in when dealing with state with React. But you may not use that. What you may use is something called some of these. So if you need quick access to the keys in your object, you quickly have a quick built-in method where you say object.keys, you output all the keys. Pretty great. It's just the key names. With that being said, you also have an object.values that returns all the values in an array. So the object.values returns an array of a given object's own enumerable property values in the same order that was provided by a for in loop. So basically, you could do a for in loop around this thing, and you could output, like in one of the lab examples, you could iterate through in a for in loop. You could have the keys and then inspect the values. You could definitely do that. Or you can just use object.values and get them all. So it's just two ways of, again, the built-in objects are pretty powerful existing. So, right, so I just wanted to go through this again. So we had, we have this object constructor here. So in the same way, we're just, yeah, I didn't do anything special with this. So it's really just, showing that you can use that object. You can use that, where am I here? You can use that object creator to create the new object and assign everything on the outside in the same way, and then call the greeting, right? Basically, we're doing this outside of the function using this object method. However, I'm sure that we could still use this object literal in the same way, same deal, right? It's just some people like the new keyword with the new object constructor. They like that. So you can use that. Sorry, you can use the new object with the empty constructor, which is this piece here. All right. Also, I think I had an example for, was it create? Okay, here. So we have, yes. So this is basically the same thing using create. So if we wanted to create a copy of this, so they're saying you can use that built-in method create. So using object create, I can take this object that is already there, and basically, so if I output at this point in time, console log.hulk, I'm gonna get that object. It's just gonna look like this. That object is gonna look like this. It's gonna say I have the name, Hulk Hogan, his age, greeting, right? And then what happens? So if I just commented this out, I'll just look at the object like this, right? So what I'm saying now is I want to create a copy of this object without doing all this work. I just want to copy it and then change the name, call the greeting again. So that's what that create method does. So I'm taking a copy of this object here. Then I'm setting the name. So this is a brand new object that I've copied from somewhere else. And all I'm doing here is setting the name and calling the greeting. So if I do that, you'll see if before I even call it, so let's not even call a greeting on it. We're just showing the fact that we could call the greeting on it. But if we console log out just the object at that point, you'll see the difference there is that right there, you can see it copied it, but it just set this name on here. And let's see what happens if I actually call the greeting there. So it didn't actually show, it showed the new object, but it doesn't show the link back to the parent object. So there is a concept we're not talking about called a prototype, and it's like a chain. So really there's a reference. So it's referencing back to its parent using that inheritance. And even though you can see on this derived class, it's not there. This greeting here exists in the parent class. So you might as well have called this parent, because up in the parent, any time there's new instances of this of that class, there's going to be, it carries along with it a greeting. It just internally, and when I call it, you can see it doesn't call it on this child class, it calls it on the parent class up there. So there, if you were to draw it out, there is actually like a link between the two. And that's where the visualization of objects gets a little bit confusing, right? But that's what you could do if you quickly needed to copy a class or sort of derive a class. What else do we say? So, okay, we'll quickly look at that in a second, but that's what the create one does. So we can look at the keys and we can look at the values easily. We can also, getting back to the properties if we needed to inspect them, there is also a method for the entries. So if you needed to look at all the entries, if you need to just output everything as is, you can do it in this way. So this takes the key value pairs and it gives you an array that you can output. So if you wanted to quickly look at this, you could do this. Now they're doing something called, if you notice this situation here, it's called destructuring. We haven't learned that yet. And they're doing something called template literals. We haven't learned that yet. But basically what it's saying is that we can grab all the entries in an array. It's going to give it to us. And then we can work with it if we need to, if we needed to do that. So if we, let me close this. I'm sorry, going back to that REPL. All right, so if we needed to remove this and we just wanted to console.log, it's late. .entries, is that going to work for us? Let's see. It's not a function. All right, so entries, maybe it's not treating it like an object. Let's see here. Where is it? Here, .entries. Let's see here. Let's look at this one then. Maybe I did something wrong. So let's look at this one here and let's take a look at what I was trying to do here. All right, so if we wanted to, we have this object here, console.log, object.entries. Okay, object.entries of object 1. Okay, let's take a look at that. So that outputs everything. So that's on the built-in method itself. Okay, let's go back. So I was trying to do it on the object itself, but I guess that makes sense. I defined a new object. It only knows about this in its scope, name, age, greeting. I can't use that built-in object because I didn't define it, but if I wanted to, okay, so I get it here. So if I wanted to walk up to it and use it, I could use that wrapper method. So if I could say entries equals to object.entries, and then give it that Hulk object. So right there, I'm wrapping it, and it basically takes an object and it's going to do the work for me. I don't need to know what entries. All right, let's see this. All right, so that's what it did. So this function is built as as like a utility that you can give it an object. So you have all these utility methods that you can provide your object to do the work, and that makes a lot of sense to me because entry is not defined in here. Even if we had our constructor or wrote this differently, right? It is not defined inside of the object. We can look at the object up here and you can see it only has a greeting function. It has no entries. So that makes sense to me. If you wanted to look at more of these, as always, there is that web documents. Inside of there, you will find a bunch of built-in object methods, and you have to look at, like, most of these take an object themselves, assign, create. You have to look at them. Is frozen, is keys, or all these different ones, right? Values, strings, bunch of different things going on here. Some more advanced, but again, it's the same deal. If you were to look at some of these and dig into them, they can help you out a lot. So anyhow, some built-in methods there that you can work with. 10 minutes to 8 minutes till class. Okay, so I'll post this in the channel as well. The question on function factory, that factory constructor pattern and the factory pattern and constructor pattern. What's the difference? Constructors force callers to use the new keyword. Factories don't. That's it. But there are relevant side effects. So you can use the new keyword, which people love because they come from different backgrounds. So instantiates, binds, so there's some technical stuff binds it to this. We haven't talked about prototype. But anyhow, benefits of the constructor and the class. So most books will teach you use the class of the constructor. This refers to the object. It makes us feel like we're programming in C# and Java and those kind of languages. Some people like the way they instantiate it, use the new keyword, how it reads, right? There's micro optimization benefits, really not. So really, there's no real issue there. Drawbacks, you have to use the new. So, constructors break open. So really, they're just saying that there's really no benefit. It's just some people prefer it in this way. And again, as JavaScript is continuing to grow, they kind of try to provide new syntax to make you feel like you are programming in more modern languages. And we're going to learn more about ES6 in that tomorrow. And